Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us today to learn more about the Trellis Foundation's request for proposals on regional ecosystem innovation for reskilling and upskilling in Texas. My name is Kristen Boyer, and I serve as Executive Director for Trellis Foundation. And joining me today will be Jenny Achilles, Director of Partnerships and Programs, and Kia Lewis, Grants Administrator. Before we get into the program details, just a reminder that the Q&A feature is available for you to submit questions and throughout the presentation, and we'll provide time at the end to review and answer those. And of course, we will be making the presentation available on the Trellis Foundation website, along with the materials that already are there to support the RFQ, which includes an FAQ list and the RFP overview document. So let's begin with the agenda for today's presentation. I'll be providing a little bit of an overview of the Foundation's strategy and context about where this RFP fits within our strategic plan. Then I'll turn it over to Jenny to cover the details of the RFP and what we'll be looking for in the application process. And then finally, Kia will provide information about the logistics of completing and submitting the application and the required documents. So to start, Trellis Foundation is now in its third full year as an independent foundation, building on more than a decade of grant-making experience as part of Trellis Company, formerly TG, which focuses on post-secondary completion and student success. Our mission at the Foundation reflects that history while advancing and articulating a renewed focus on equity in systems and outcomes, particularly for low-income students and students of color. Our strategy considers three areas of focus: holistic student supports, streamlined pathways, and reconnection for returning learners. The RFP that we're talking about today for 2021 fits within the third focus area, which aims to connect students or reconnect them with educational opportunities that directly advance to career goals. Second, the Foundation considers three main approaches in the work we support: localized direct impact, scaling practices, or driving structural and policy change. For this RFP, we're prioritizing the local and regional impact specific to the outcomes in the RFP. So we are always interested in broader implications that can be shared across the state or even beyond Texas. So if your work involves ideas that could lead to greater impact, and you can work those details into your application, we would definitely welcome that. And just a quick note about convening and catalyzing collaboration. This is an approach that we believe spans all aspects of the work that we do. So we will also be looking for ways to bring our grantees together in community, as well as more broadly sharing the outcomes and strategies that hold promise or potential for scale in the future. The other essential component for aligning with the Foundation's strategy relates to equity. While the Foundation has always operated with consciousness about the inequities in our educational outcomes, we want to be more specific and intentional about addressing them. So in this RFP, we will be collecting and considering information on the diversity and inclusion reflected in the applying organization's leadership, in the students being served, and in the data collected to demonstrate outcomes. We firmly believe that the diversity of Texas workforce is the key to our continued vitality and growth in the state and the nation. We are excited about the opportunity to learn and grow in our intentionality around equity, and we're happy to be on this journey with each of you and do what we can to encourage all of us to pay more attention and more intention around issues of equity. So with that, I'm going to invite Jenny to take with the details of the RFP itself.
Thank you, Kristen. And 1 second while we transition. All right. So good to see everyone today. And since I know some of you have been joining as we got started, I'm just going to reintroduce myself, Jenny Achilles, Director of Partnerships and Programs at Trellis Foundation. We are excited today to share our first RFP of 2021, focused on reskilling and upskilling employees with a lens toward the regional collaborations needed to address that effectively. We know that in the midst of the incredible health and economic crises we've been facing, we have immediate needs to address here in Texas. In addition, we know that providing clear directions to Texans on ways to further their education and career advancement opportunities will continue to be a top priority in the future as well. And we know that increasing collaboration among partners, including workforce and higher ed partners, is key to accomplishing that. And 1 sec while there we go. In this RFP, we encourage you to include a broad range of partners in the work. This can include colleagues in the workforce and industry, higher ed, and community-based organizations, both on the workforce training and the college retention sides. In addition, we would encourage you to consider methods to incorporate feedback directly from employees and students who would be served by your collaboration. As Kristen noted in the 2 slides ago, equity is a key focus, and we know that listening to the communities we're working with is one way that we help achieve that. So the work does need to take place in Texas and benefit Texas learners. It should have both short and long-term plans and outcomes, and your applications can represent either an established or an emerging collaboration. Both are acceptable. For this RFP, we anticipate awarding 4 to 6 grants, and the amounts will not to exceed $250,000 each. So with that, in a few minutes, I'll give a little bit more insight into what we see as the most likely aspects of a competitive application. But before we do that, Lakia Lewis, our grants administrator, is going to walk us through the actual application process. So these are the logistics, and this is some key information here for a sec. So turn it over to Kia.
All right, thank you, Jenny. So we are really excited. We just recently launched our new grants management system with Giving Data. And our goal with this new system is to provide grantees with an easier access to information. So Giving Data provides a creative and interactive application process. And after we've approved proposals, you'll be able to access your progress reports and have task reminders all through the portal. So we're really excited about that. So you'll see the link in the RFP application. All applications will be submitted through this link. Once you select the link, it will ask you to sign in or create a new user. There are a few people who already have accounts with us from previously approved processes. This information will pre-populate. So if you've ever had a grant approved with us previously, the information in the system will pre-populate, so that we ask that you are very mindful and you're double checking and making sure that the contacts are up to date, the address is up to date when you're in that application process. To the right, there will be a panel that you can utilize. It'll help you navigate through the application. As you complete sections, there are certain sections that are required fields. The application will not let you submit if you have not completed all of the required fields. Within that, there will be 2 downloadable and re-uploadable attachments. One of those being our demographic survey. Jenny and Kristen have both spoke about equity. This ties into that. It's going to be, we want to make sure that your board and executive level and staff, what that looks like in your organization. So that's one of the documents. The next slide, Jenny. We'll have another downloadable file, which is our budget template. It's important that you all utilize it has auto add features for you for sums, but what's most important is that you remember that 20% of your overall project budget has to be covered by other funders or with in-kind support. When you open up the budget, it will have additional instructions. You'll click over to the second tab in order to import your line item fields. We are very flexible in line items. However, there are certain things that the foundation does not cover, and you can see those in the slide. Again, if you do not upload this file, the system will not let you submit your application. As far as the timeline goes, which is on our next slide, this application automatically closes at 5 p.m. So please be sure to have your applications completely submitted and reviewed before then. Once you hit submit, you cannot resubmit this application. We won't be opening it back up. Is there anything that I'm missing, Jenny, for the application process?
I don't think so.
Okay, and if you have any questions throughout the time that you're in your application, feel free to email me or email at info@trellisfoundation.com, and we'll be happy to help you. The other thing I'd like to mention for the application is that we are asking that you only have one user per application sign in. That just makes it simple. So one person only, please, and that'll be best for everyone. You can share your links with other people within your organization, but just have one user name. So I'll turn it back over to Jenny, and she's going to review how the review process goes.
Thank you, Kia. And before I forget, I do want to mention, thanks, Kia, that on the demographic survey that she mentioned, that is a tool that it is required, and we are looking at that. It is not it's not part of the scoring practice right now, right? We are learning about the organizations, and it's an important component in what we want to see, but it isn't, it won't be in the rubric. You won't be penalized for the responses therein. All right, so after your application is submitted, we may follow up with requests for additional information as part of the review process. And I want to share more insights into what we anticipate that we'll see in the strongest applications. As a reminder, because I know some of you have joined as the conversation progressed, I want to remind you we are a funder focused on equitable outcomes in post-secondary education. So those post-secondary outcomes are key to us as a foundation. So keep that in mind as you're completing the application. So first, related to the underlying plan of your application, strong applications will show an understanding of the needs and the existing capacity in their region. They will address economic and employer needs of their region through education and training that will lead to family-sustaining wages in high-demand occupations. And collaborations should understand and prioritize the needs of subpopulations, with a particular emphasis on disaggregating data by race and ethnicity and gender. Applications will be evaluated on the breadth and depth of partnerships to demonstrate the strategic nature of this initiative. The size of the partnership and the scope of the work will depend on how established your collaboration is. We anticipate the strongest applications will have an approach that addresses the immediate needs of students. Again, this is a response to COVID. So it'll address the immediate needs of students while also placing the response within a longer term strategy. So as an example, let's say your regional data shows a high need for employees in the IT sector, and your collaboration has identified a high need and a regional capacity to reskill retail sector customer service professionals to IT customer service jobs, hypothetically. So the short-term work might involve first developing a clear map of the transferability of those skills from one sector to another. So that's step one, as well as the additional technical training that the retail professionals would need in this switch. And then the next step might be a combination of employer partnerships and more general population marketing to help share that map with former retail employees so they can reskill and then be connected directly to employment opportunities. So short term might be getting them from the jobs that they lost during the pandemic to a comparable but needed additional training position right now. So that short-term work could then take place alongside a longer-term strategy around connecting the upskilling credentials and the entry-level work to a career pathway with corresponding stackable educational advancement as well. So that could include a guide for how that student could take that initial training and advance to an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree, with also an understanding, a complementary map of the corresponding career opportunities with each of those subsequent education levels. So again, immediate need to get them employed, but then with a plan for the future that allows for additional education and career advancement within your region, and then with the understanding of the partnerships available. So that's just one example of what this could look like, but I wanted to give it a little bit of fleshed out detail as to help. I want to remind you that as you develop your applications, the RFP document provides additional context from what we've discussed today. So that's going to be your key. It also includes links to valuable data tools that can help you in your regional occupation analysis. So definitely keep returning to that document as you're building your proposal. A couple final points. As you complete your application, you may find it helpful to include additional documents not specifically required. So that is completely up to what is helpful for you as you're thinking through the proposal and then how you best want to communicate it to the review team. So an example might be a logic model or a similar tool. It's not required, but if there's a structure as you're thinking about where you are, where you want to get to long term, and what you'll be doing during the grant to get there, and then how you'll know if you achieved it. Like if there's a tool or a thought process you used as you developed that, you're welcome to upload that as an additional document. Since we have a limited number of awards and a priority for geographic diversity in our cohort, we don't anticipate that we would select more than one grant per region or subregion. So the extent that partners can coordinate ahead of time to determine regional priorities, the better. We will review multiple applications from a single region, but if we're unclear why the applicants didn't coordinate on a single proposal instead, it may weaken both applications. So if you're listening and you're an emerging partnership and you would like connections to other organizations in the region, please feel free to send us a separate email, not necessarily a chat or a Q&A today, but follow up with an email, and we'll help facilitate that to the best of our ability. All right. Here's a screenshot of our FAQs on the website. For any other questions that come up, please do refer to the website, and we will be updating this FAQ section as it becomes relevant. Like after today, we'll see what we get and we'll refresh it as well in response to that. As a reminder, the first question there right now includes the link to return to an in-process application. So the RFP document has the initial login to set up your portal and to get started on the application. Once you've gone in, you maybe worked on it a little while, saved and exited, in order to get back into the application, there's a separate link, and that is the very first FAQ on that website. For any additional questions, please feel free to email me. Due to the anticipated volume of applications, email and the FAQ site will be my go-to for answering questions. But that said, we can always determine whether a question is beyond the scope of email and we need to jump on a call, but I do ask you to use those two as your first methods. Only one other comment I thought of is that I want to share is, as a reminder for the review team and for our board, sometimes we don't have all of the context that's in your brain, so just remember to check for shorthand and acronyms, etc., that may or may not be familiar to the review team and to our board, including words that may have multiple meanings depending on your sector. So just a reminder to provide full context in the application for everything that you're sharing. All right, and now switch to Q&A in 1 second as I look through them. Okay. So our first question, we have, when do funds expire? Is the $250 to use over the course of 3 years? So yes, you can request a 2 or 3 year grant for a total of $250,000, and your budget would reflect how you wanted that divided up during the course of the grant. The slides, we can upload them as a PDF. The recording will also be available on the webinar. One second. Right, when we refer to students, are we referring to high school or college, or is it flexible? So this is that's a great question. I'm glad to get to clarify this. It's a reskilling and upskilling grant. So we do not anticipate high school students would participate in this. We as a post-secondary funder, oftentimes give grants that are focused on the direct to college pipeline. This is not one of them. This is our reconnecting learners focus area, and we're really looking at folks who've already graduated from high school, and they either they may have some previous post-secondary, they may not, right? But they are in the workforce now, and they need additional training, and so they're either coming back for the first time or coming back for additional training. But this will be reconnecting, and so that's our lens on this. And Kristen, were you going to add?
I might jump in and just say we are very interested because I think there are nice connections between this kind of work and strengthening the partnerships with school districts in their career and technology education programs, their endorsements that lead to certificates or certifications. So that element included in the context of a long-term plan or a region's outlook on the developing partnerships with throughout the education continuum is going to be of great appeal to us. But yes, what you said, Jenny, earlier about the focus of this specific RFP is really about the post-secondary, the post-high school reskilling and upskilling relationship with higher education that we're thinking about. So great question, though. Yes,
thank you. And a follow-up to that, would opportunity youth be a population that could be a focus? And yes, again, like not while you're trying to reconnect them to high school, but opportunity youth who are beyond the high school age and are looking to reconnect to the workforce, for sure. Can funds be used for scholarship? I saw a question like this, and then also asking about workforce training costs for students included in the questions submitted in advance. That can be a line item, yes. We're not restricting that. You're welcome to include it as a line item. As a reminder, we would expect the majority of the budget to focus on the development and advancement of this collaboration and the partnerships together, and not solely. So if out of $250,000, we would not anticipate a $200,000 scholarship ask with a $50K addition, like a little bit of admin support on the side. We would expect this to really, a strong application will focus on the depth of that collaboration and partnerships and how you're thinking about this regionally for a long-term sustainable way of thinking about upskilling in your region. Kristen? Yeah, and I would also add to that, in developing this RFP, we did have great conversations with colleagues at the Texas Workforce Commission and with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And the coordinating board in particular just released their own RFP and some funding that came as part of the GEAR funding from the federal Department of Education related to tuition, fees, some subsidies for students. So that's an area where if you're showing partnership and you're working with a higher education institution that was a recipient of those funds through the coordinating board, that's a great example of leveraged support for this work. So there are some other resources that could contribute to scholarship and fees and tuition costs for students if you're looking around for that. Thank you. We have a couple of questions on scale of impact in terms of number of students, whether we're looking at hundreds versus thousands, if there's an appropriate number that we're specifically looking for. Great question. And again, I think the number of students who can be served during the grant period definitely is determined by emerging versus established to a great extent. We don't have a specific number. Breadth number, like the more students served, the better. Again, the plan is for this to be a long-term regional effect. And so if you're looking at a dozen students, that's not going to be what we're looking for in a collaborative experience like this. At the same time, you may not be hitting tens of thousands of students, and that's understood. And Kristen, you look like you're
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas where we will be looking to regions to define the need and providing the data and the background for us to understand a particular, if a region is focusing on one particular occupational pathway, give us the context for that in your community. What is the need? Where are those potential working learners coming from? What's the universe of the supply and demand on that particular stream of work? So yeah, the more data, the more context that a region can provide, the better that will be.
Couple of questions. Sorry, there's such good questions and I'm trying to sort through which one's best to do right now. So question on a little more understanding about what's emerging versus advanced. For example, if an agency has an existing partnership with proposed grant partners, does that automatically make them an advanced collaborative? And I think, and so again, and since they're both allowed, right? Like I think I would say this can probably be a little fuzzy, right? So you may, so let's say if you have a P16 council that already incorporates your workforce board, I'm just throwing out examples here because it's easier for me to think in examples. And so you've been looking at data and you've been working on reskilling, you've some aspect of this you've been working on, that's definitely an established collaborative. An established collaborative I would also think about that as an existing P16 council where you're then bringing in industry and workforce more robustly through this conversation. But there isn't, I guess since there's no penalty to being either one, the way that looks in your region is gonna vary.
Yeah, and I think you can look, there's a list of potential outcomes or potential goals or aspects of the work to be considering that are split out by an emerging collaborative versus an established collaborative, and just take a look at those and get a sense, even if you are in a collaborative that's been working mostly on the direct to college issues for your region, and you have not, you've been doing that for years, but you've never really thought about that next step of what does the post-secondary training and relationship with higher education look like. You could have a nicely established group, but this is a brand new aspect of the work, and so your outcomes or the things that you might want to work on would relate more to what the emerging outcomes that are listed as examples in that in the RFP document. So take a look at those things and see what's a good fit there. And again, those outcomes are really just examples. They're not meant to be prescriptive, and we're not trying to dictate what's the best working model for your region. So just take them as they are, as suggestions, examples, possible considerations.
Thank you. And I am seeing several, and just because we may run out of time, just a reminder, some of the questions I'm seeing are actually on this FAQ list. So when you come up on the website and click on it, it'll give you a broader, I can't show it to you right now, but some of these are answered there. So I'll circle back to them if we have time, but I'm not going to start with ones that around the outcomes, which again, we tried to offer about 20 different examples of potential outcomes in the RFP. And then if it's on this FAQ, but if we have time, I'll circle back and we'll go back over them in more depth here. Is a question on preference for who submits the application. We aren't, again, we tried to be not super prescriptive in this, as we've said. The reason wasn't, we're not trying to read the funder's mind, guess the magic answer. It really is because we understand that every community has a different makeup, right? Like it works differently in every community. So on this one, I would just remind you that it's a collaboration, and it's not a required, but the example we give of what that means in the RFP is collective impact, right? And so if the applicant for this is really serving as a backbone for an ongoing conversation. And as a reminder, we are thinking of this as an ongoing conversation. So if you're coming to us with a very specific, this will last for 3 years, that's all we want it to last for, this, we're not thinking long-term, that's not going to be a strong application for this particular RFP. So it really is who in your community makes the most sense to not only shepherd the grant process, right, which is its own thing. So understand that as far as hitting the submit button, it may be, that one partner is best for handling the grant details. But we really are thinking about who's the best person to be managing all the different aspects that come into a collaboration, right? And so whereas we imagine that most applications will have, say, a community college partner, we imagine many of them will have community college partners. The community college may not be the member who really wants to be managing multiple partners over the long term in a backbone role. So anything else on that one, Kristen?
Nope, I think that's good.
All right. No. Okay, so question about, does it need to fund a new program, or can it be used to expand already established initiative or program? Yes, it can be expanding an already established. Again, framing everything in the need and what these grant dollars will help you accomplish to that.
And I'm seeing the question about whether the outcomes are focused on academic degrees or certifications. And this is actually, I think, a really interesting area to explore, because there are many existing, very effective, non-credit bearing certificates or credentials being offered right now that may be exactly what the community needs. What we would love to see is an exploration of how we value those credentials, and whether there's a willingness in the higher education system to think differently about the competencies and the outcomes of those types of programs, and how they might stack into credit-bearing opportunities for students to be able to, be lifelong learners, continue to come back into the education system as needed to advance their own goals and the goals of the community's workforce needs too. So I think it's a great question, and I think there's some room for some experimentation. And really, at the end of the day, for our foundation, our pockets are not super deep. We know that we're talking about a limited resource for regions. We're talking about a huge need at the moment that will continue to grow. So really, I think the benefit that our funding can give is a little bit of flexibility to play with these ideas and see where they might lead, to take some risks that you might not be able to take with federal funding or with state funding or other things. So think about what the possibilities are and what's the most useful for you, for the students and workers that you're serving. But I think that's one of the exciting things about this proposal opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the innovation part of this RFP brings us. So could be cool. And then maybe just go over one more time the funding regions and our concept of.
Right. So we specifically didn't identify that, and you'll see that on the FAQ. We didn't want to. We thought about it. We're like, well, should it be community college district? Should it be workforce board region? Like, what are the established like governmental structures should we use? And we decided not to specify because again, every community is different, and it may make more sense for this work so we're letting you define what you mean by region or sub-region. I live here, so in Central Texas in Austin, so sometimes it's easier for me to give geographical, et cetera, examples. So let's say I'm applying in Austin, right? Like my region could be Austin and any partner that works in Austin, right? Like the city limits could be kind of how I'm thinking about it. It also could very much be that Leander and Cedar Park and Pflugerville and Round Rock are all part of my region, right? Like I can also define it that way. If I'm really looking at a lot of work that has to do with connections, not like, let's say long-term, I'm wanting to connect to 4-year. Texas State might be part of my partnership too. And that may like sort of broaden the way my region. So we don't need you to draw on a map, like the exact geographical area. It's just sort of the partners that you're bringing together will help define that. And I know that's still a little squishy, but again, like we didn't want to require, so like we didn't want to be like Central Texas has to mean Austin, Pflugerville, and Round Rock, but it can't mean Cedar Park or Leander, right? So it really kind of depends on what's going on. And if you might have a really broad region, might be multiple cities and a couple different 4-year partners in your region. If you've got some great collaboration going across cities, I can think of some examples in the Panhandle or in West Texas, where you've got multiple cities that would count as a region together. Or you might be a really big city and not want to include the whole city. There may be some more tightly defined partners within a sub-region then that make a lot of sense for this particular work in your particular region. The question about multiple regions, can you apply for each region separately, or must you concentrate on only one? So again, this is imagine that multiple partners in a community would come together. And so if you're a partner that works with multiple different communities, I mean, that would depend on the different communities, right? If there's 3 different communities who all identify your work as key to what they're doing, then that we're not going to disqualify any of the communities for having this the same partner in all of them. If you work with multiple regions, you're probably not the lead who's going to submit that application, right? Because it is community region specific, and so you would be an additional partner on someone else's grant application, and you can be that partner on multiple applications, but you would not likely be the applicant in this case. Submitting data, reports, etc. is the lead partner the one to submit that information. We will work with one primary contact. Once the grant has been awarded, you can establish who's going to be our primary contact, but there will be one person that we will work for, and whoever else you need to talk to get the answers to the report questions, we'll leave up to you, but we will have one primary contact for each grant, but that does not have to be determined until after the award. Okay, a couple of good questions, and Kristen, we may have to tag on this one, around the kinds of line items. So is there a restriction on funds for student supports or enhancing support systems like establishing childcare services while students are attending school. And then another related is transportation dollars. And my answer would be that, again, those can be line items in it. We would not expect them to be all 250,000 of the request, but they can be line items within it. Kristen, additional thoughts on that one?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Absolutely not restricting a line item like that. That yes, absolutely allowable in terms of the project budget. But yeah, ultimately we are looking for the community engagement and the outcomes that really change the structures of the pipeline from training and higher education and workforce. So yeah, good question, but yeah.
Yeah, and related, do we have a list of allowable and disallowed? So the slide on the budget really is our list of allowable and disallowable. Like there isn't a more, and we do have an FAQ on here on constraints that we have on the funding. 10% indirect is our limit there. And yeah, that is our, if you have a specific cost, you're welcome to email us if you're thinking that you're not sure if that would qualify. Grant period question, 2 to 3 years. That one we're really relying on y'all to determine what makes the most sense. Again, the max funding is 250, and the max time allowed is 3 years. But we are deferring to your community to determine what makes sense.
Yeah, and it kind of reflected in the question about sustainability. If you're looking at a 3-year time frame and you want to front load grant funding in the first year and second year, showing that other partners or there's other consideration happening around where will the funding be sustained, or how will those costs be allocated and provided for within transition in the second year and into the third year. That's always a really nice way for us to see the commitment and the intention around keeping the work going beyond the grant period. So yes, we will be paying attention to that, especially for those applications that are requesting a 3-year time frame. That sustainability, so easy just to show that in a 3-year timeline. So
thank you. Question, how often will reports be due? We usually require about 2 reports annually. And then I'm not sure I understand the question about how we would determine who to connect. I'm not sure. Can you clarify this question?
Oh, well, yeah, I think this is in the event that you are an emerging partnership, or you have an idea but want to connect with others in your region. That we have some contacts and have had some conversations with key partners, key initiatives, key collaboratives around the state. And if there's any way that we can help make those connections, we're happy to do that. So we would just welcome the conversation to get started, figure out what you want to provide, what your strengths are, and who would be good partners to connect you with, and then we'll do what we can to make those connections. Related to our desire to see some geographic diversity in the grants awarded through this, not all of our connections are as strong in every region of the state. So, but yeah, we're willing to help forge some of those relationships if at all possible. So. And then Jenny, did anything come in ahead of the webinar that we didn't cover?
Yeah, I'm looking at that. So I think we've covered for the most part. I'll go ahead since we have we're okay. We'll need to wrap up, but since we don't have a long list of additional questions, question about our considerations made for rural regions or communities. Again, we're open to whatever definition of region or community makes sense for you. We are looking for geographic diversity. We would expect rural communities to submit applications as well. And again, however you best define what that region and thus the partnerships within it need to look like, works for us. And then had one question about if you're currently receiving Trellis funding, but I'll reach back out. I think for the broad answer to that one is this would not sort of like reiterating the existing application to us. It was, are you eligible? So yes, you would be eligible to apply. Just because you don't have a current grant doesn't mean you can't apply, but you can't apply for the current grant for this, right? This is not a supplemental $250,000 for an existing grant. And we don't have any that 100% in existing form would be what we would want to see anyway. It can be complementary, and or it could be just because you're finishing out a grant with us doesn't mean that you couldn't apply with a region as for this work. And I think we got through everything. All right. Kristen, do you want to close us out, or do you want me to? Just realized.
You go ahead.
Okay. So that ends our webinar talking about this RFP. Thank you all for your time. Again, there's our email address, info@trellisfoundation.org, for any questions you have. They will come to all three of us, so we will see it and be able to get back with you. And again, for additional information on the foundation, especially because I know we have a lot of colleagues we haven't worked with in the past on this webinar today, so would really encourage you to visit our website and revisit what we talked about with our strategic goals and our mission, and get to know us a little bit more there. And then that grant information page does house the FAQs for today, and that link to the all important document, that RFP PDF, which is going to be your guiding tool in this process. So thank you again so much for your time and for the work you're doing, your interest in connecting with us, and we look forward to answering questions over the next several weeks and to reviewing applications and working with you all going forward. Thank you.
Thanks.